13th a mouse in the house. Jockey of Norfolk, be not too bold, for Dickon thy master is bought and sold. Richard III, Act 5, Scene 3. Bresler let out a long sigh and then buried his face in his hands. "Oh Christ," he moaned. "I know this will sound pathetic, but are you sure, Wayne?" "You know I wouldn't ever say such a thing unless I were convinced it were true, Gary," replied Hill compassionately. "I'm going to run what I've got by you. If you can see something I've missed, if you can explain some of the things that have been happening, then I'm all ears. You know I'm going to fight like the very devil to stand up for my people and prove you're wrong," said Bresler. "I wouldn't expect anything else from you, Gary, and neither would your volunteers. I hope you can prove me wrong. No one would be happier than me if that turns out to be possible. But I don't think so." "First question. Who else have you spoken to about this?" asked the XO. "My own boss at 3Sec, Matt Redmond, Commandant Coyle." "Now you, not Bud Lawler?" asked Bresler. "No. Captain Lawler's in the mix," replied Hill grimly. "Jesus Christ on a raft," cried Bresler in astonishment. "You think the battalion commander might be a traitor?" "No, I don't, actually. I think it's someone lower down, but I simply said that Lawler's in the mix, and so until we rule him out definitively, he can't be brought in on it. When we do, and he knows you talked to me first before him, I hope to hell he's an understanding guy," remarked Bresler. "So do I," agreed Hill. "But he's a soldier and he knows how these things work, how they must work. I don't like pulling rank, Gary, but I need to remind you that although we're both lieutenants, I'm doing double duty as Brigade Intelligence Officer and Political Officer." "Yeah, I know. You got the biggest dick, and now you're swinging it," said Bresler bitterly. "Okay, next obvious question. How do you know it isn't me?" "For 100% certain, I don't," admitted Hill. "But you're not in the mix, so far as I can tell. The series of red-flagged incidents I'm querying, specifically 9 of them, began back in the late summer of last year, before the 2 Portland brigades split into battalions. The first 3 red flags affected 3 companies in what was then the original 1st Brigade, A, B, and G. That would indicate someone with cross-company access and information," said Bresler. "Theoretically, yes, but you know as well as I do that out here in the real world, where the bullets are flying, compartmentalization breaks down all over the place. Companies help each other out on operations. Guys who are on the bounce from one company hide out with people from other units, boyfriends and girlfriends split up and one gets transferred, so forth and so on. But there is another more significant tip-off. The split into battalions took place in early October, and the subsequent 6 incidents involved the 2nd Battalion's A, C, D, and H companies. No problems in 1st, at least none that aren't clearly explicable. 3rd Battalion? Zach Hatfield and the Wild Bunch? Asked Bresler, still stunned by the revelation of possible treachery. No, Zach's boys don't seem to be affected, at least so far. Just the urban crews. It looks like our bad apple went with 2nd Battalion when the brigade divided. Beautiful, muttered Bresler. Sorry, man, this has knocked me for a loop. I'm not thinking straight. Go on. You came over from 2nd Brigade in December, and you didn't move up to the XO position until January when your predecessor was arrested, said Hill. That's one of the questionable incidents, by the way. So far as I can tell, you're clear on 5 of the 9 red flags, since you weren't in 1st Brigade when they occurred and you had no way of knowing the information the enemy got hold of. Plus there's one final situation besides all that, where we honestly don't know what the fuck is going on, but it looks damned odd. I'll tell you about it in a bit, but I'm positive you didn't know about that one, so you couldn't have spilled the beans to anyone. I've got to have someone I can trust to help me on this. Help me sift through it all. Find common denominators. Pinpoint who knew what and when they knew it. That has to be you. Sure, I have the authority to start hauling everybody in for sit-downs and interrogations, but if I do that, then the word will be all over the 2nd Battalion in 24 hours, and not only will everybody start covering their ass whether they've done anything or not, but if there is an informer, and repeat that I am certain there is, then we'll tip him or her off, and they'll bolt. I hate like hell to ask you to investigate your own guys, Gary, but this has to be done, for everybody's safety and for the mission of the Army. Besides, it's an order. I get the picture, said Bresler with a sigh. Okay, I'll put some coffee on and you lay it on me, from the top. All right, said Hill. I don't have to tell you that while we've been hitting the bastards hard and scoring some major points, the Portland Command has been having a run of bad luck for some time now, especially 1st Brigade. Casualties, arrests, and quartermaster losses are higher here than any other unit in the NVA. You know there are reasons for that, protested Bresler, spooning coffee into the paper filter for the coffee maker. Portland is a very densely populated city due to all those lefty-uppy anti-development and anti-suburban sprawl ordinances they've had for a generation. We've got almost the same population as Seattle, in 1/3 the square mileage, compared to the Puget Sound area, and certainly compared to anywhere else in the homeland. We're packed in like sardines here. That makes it a lot easier area for Zog to control and monitor with their closed-circuit TV cameras on every goddamn street corner, their other electronic surveillance, and their loyalist vigilante neighborhood hate watches. That means more nosy neighbors and potential security leaks cheek by jowl wherever we operate. More potential informers who fancy some of those $50,000 per head domestic terrorist rewards. More spics and gooks and Mexicans and red, white, and blue assholes around every corner to drop a dime on us. God, I envy the wild bunch all those wide open spaces and forests they've got down Highway 30. Of course, all that means there's more targets for us to take down, so this is where the NVA has to be. We're active as hell. We float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. We bitch slap Zog someplace around this city every day. But more street action also means more things that can go wrong. Anytime we come out to fight, we're risking some kind of capture or compromise or betrayal. Because by doing so, we feed the enemy intelligence analysts more information, more pieces of the puzzle they can fit together. Cross your fingers and knock wood. But I'm amazed. Cat Eyes Lockhart hasn't been nailed yet, especially as casual as he is about walking around the streets. I don't know if he's completely fearless or if he's a little nuts. Both, I think. Yes, I know it's like you say, and I agree, said Hill. But still, the fact remains that casualties and losses of arms and premises and equipment in Portland, and especially in 1st Brigade, are inordinately high. 7 men gone, 2 dead and 5 arrested, plus dozens of vehicles, over 100 weapons, thousands of rounds of ammunition, and over $40,000 in funds seized. There is an unusual pattern developing with those losses. What do you mean? The coffee maker gurgled merrily in the background. Let's go over each red flag. Hill spoke without notes from memory, since notes of any kind would have been a fatal thing for him to be found in possession of. In September, a safe house in St. John's was raided, with loss of weapons and ammunition and cash. The Portland Police Bureau talking head told the media that an alert local hate watch member called in suspicious activity to the cops. We tried to get confirmation from our own people in Portland PB but couldn't, which isn't surprising since those computer files are guarded like Fort Knox and we haven't been able to get in that deep or find any way to hack in. I'm not surprised, since we've whacked out 8 or 10 of those treacherous Shabazgoy fucks, said Bresler. What's their pay up to now? $400 a week, tax-free, said Hill. A nice little bonus to that nice old Mr. Beasley down the street for a little part-time amateur spying, but our information is, Zog is getting fewer and fewer takers since hate watchers started turning up dead. Okay, that's one, said Bresler. On September 30th, an arms dump in a commercial storage unit in Gresham, continued Hill. 40 weapons, more cash and ammo gone. Portland PB spokesperson says the cash turned up when a maintenance man went into the unit to look for water damage after a heavy rain or some such shit. 3Sec got the name of the so-called maintenance man, some Mexican we can't locate, presumably illegal. That's 2, said Bresler. October 20th. Volunteer Steve Bright from B Company arrested at his home in St. John's by running rats. They broke in silently, caught him asleep, and he couldn't resist. Portland PB says he was originally sought on warrants for unpaid traffic tickets, of all the ridiculous things, and after his arrest they found weapons and material indicating he was NVA. Now that has more than a whiff of bullshit in it, agreed Bresler. It does. Like they'd send out a full rapid response team in the middle of the night over traffic tickets. Those are the first 3 under the old brigade structure. In late October, the Portland Command's formation into battalions occurred. On November 8th, a major arms dump and machine shop for end of day was raided in Hillsborough, and volunteer Richard Patrone was shot and wounded before being arrested. The Portland cops' story this time is that they busted a Mexican gangbanger who ratted out some suspicious gringos to save his own ass on a dope charge. I'm always nervous about doing anything in Hillsborough these days. It's become such a barrio, said Bresler. But that's for number 5. November 30th, the 2nd Battalion Finance Officer Roger West is arrested, his hard drive seized, and 3 covert bank accounts sequestered. Fortunately, our finances were at a low ebb and we only lost about 40 grand total, but another week and there would have been over $200,000 in those accounts. Portland's cut from that Indian casino heist up in Washington that Tank Thompson's crew out of Dundee pulled off. Portland police spokesperson says a routine audit at one of the banks spotted something fishy. Now, do you begin to see what I mean by a pattern here, Jack? It's all Portland police, said Bresler suddenly. No FBI, no Batfay, no Homeland Security. How did the Portland Flatfeet get to be such ace terrorist fighters all of a sudden? That's one suspicious aspect, yes, concurred Hill. Number 6 is the worst incident of the lot. On Christmas Eve, volunteers Lex Vanaway and Dutch Kripe are trapped by an RRT team in the downtown Denny's and are shot and killed, along with the waitress and several other diners wounded in the ensuing firefight. The Portland PB spokesperson praises the brave officers of RRT, who actually crashed an armored assault vehicle through the front window of the restaurant so they wouldn't have to fire at our men without cover. The cops claim that Kripe and Vanaway were recognized on a closed-circuit TV monitor by computerized facial profiling. So maybe they were, suggested Bresler. Maybe, conceded Hill. Incident number 7, January 7th. 2nd Battalion XO Peanuts Panchko is arrested at a shopping mall in Gresham. Portland PB claims the mall security guard's sniffer dog picked up gun oil and powder residue on him. We lost a good man there. One of our guys in the Justice Center was able to get a message out, and he says Panchko may be dead. They heard him being tortured for several nights running, but no one has seen him since. Mother of God, moaned Bresler. I didn't know Peanuts long, but he was a funny guy. I liked him. He poured out cups of coffee and handed Hill one. Let's not give up on him until we have confirmation, said Hill with a sigh. Incident number 8. February 3rd. 26 rifles, assorted other arms and ammo, one of Portland's only 2 M60 machine guns, and our one remaining RPG launcher scooped up from an arms dump in the Blue Skies Motel in Aloha. The manager was an NVA asset attached to a company's second bat, but he managed to E&E okay, and he's now gone to full active service status with Billy. Portland PB says an alert Mexican chambermaid spotted the guns. These cop stories are getting pretty thin by this time. We know there weren't any Mexicans working there. Our guy employed only Russian and Serb and white American girls, and the room in question was locked up and never cleaned. So we know they're bullshitting on that one. This isn't looking good, admitted Bresler sadly. Hill scowled. It looks even worse on incident number 9, February 8th. Volunteer Bert Nordfeldt was surrounded and arrested by a Portland plainclothes squad in the Sheraton Hotel restaurant downtown. He had to go in light for a meeting because of the metal detectors, so he didn't even have a gun on him. The woman he was supposed to meet saw the bust go down from the lobby. She followed procedure, yelled spaghetti, and beat feet to her E&E point. She's been debriefed and everything she says holds water. I'm sure she's clean. In an amazing reversal of their whole policy ever since 1022 in Coeur d'Alene, Nordfeldt is put into a regular police cell, and he is allowed a court-appointed lawyer, some smarmy character from legal aid named Van Meek, who has a reputation as a scumbag even by lawyer standards. Van Meek can't get anything out of our guy except the 5 words, of course. But that doesn't matter, since he's doing all the talking. He tells Nordfeldt that he was recognized from Oregon's Most Wanted's weekly spotlight on terrorism by a waiter in the restaurant named Alvin Johnson, a young white kid, college student. The Portland cops supposedly burned their own informant to the suspect? Snorted Bresler. If you believe that, I have this bridge in Brooklyn I can let you have cheap. Well, granted, that happens sometimes. Police and legal aid lawyers aren't exactly the sharpest knives in Zog's drawer. But then, without being asked, this Van Meek scuzzball goes and sees Nordfeldt's mother and his brother and his girlfriend, all of whom were also pulled in and interrogated but then released. He tells them the same story about the waiter kid. Naturally, Johnson's name gets back to us, almost as if it was intended to. I go looking, very carefully, because by now I'm smelling a rat. What did the Johnson kid have to say? Asked Bresler. Nothing. He's disappeared. So he took his 50 grand blood money, and then he took off for parts unknown? Suggested Bresler. Maybe, said Hill. Trouble is, I was able to ease my body into the kitchen at the Sheraton, into the manager's office, and get a look at Johnson's time card. He wasn't punched in on the night of February 8th. He wasn't even working the day Nordfeld was pinched. Sounds like you need to have a little talk with jurisconsult Van Meek, said Bresler. We did, said Hill. We detained him last night, in fact. Since he's a lawyer, I actually read him the FBI's Dershowitz protocols from my own copy, while a colleague of mine was laying out the needles, just to let him know it was all legal and above board. We never even touched him. By the middle of page 2, he was screaming for mercy. He admitted that the Portland cops put him up to it. Portland PB? Not FBI or DHS? Asked Bresler keenly. Portland PB. 2 detectives first grade, very nasty mooks from the old Pretin 20 Seconds hate crime squad. A brown Barbie doll named Elena Martinez and her partner, a big badass nigger named Jamal Jarvis, also known as the Mommy and the Monkey. I'm familiar with their names, and I've seen some photos, said Bresler. They've been on the hit parade almost since 10/22, but we can't seem to catch up with them. Hill nodded. Yeah, we've even sent Cat Eyes Lockhart out hunting them a couple of times on tip-offs, but no luck. Jarvis and Martinez are cagey and they're smooth. They know damned well the party remembers them from the bad old days, and they're both on the spot marked 10th. They've moved out of their old digs, and they're living somewhere undercover now. They keep their heads down, and they move off the radar, which fits in with what we hear about them now doing covert DT work for the Portland department. Their names have cropped up in other contexts. Everybody in the department down to the janitor down at the Justice Center knows there's something going on with those two, but no one knows what. Now Van Meek says they're the ones who gave him this Alvin Johnson red herring. He swore he didn't know any more about it, and I believe him. He just did as he was paid to do. He has no idea where the waiter is. I hate to say it, but I think that poor Johnson kid was just an expendable white boy, and Zog has vaporized him to keep up the masquerade and protect their rat. I suppose the legal beagle is buried in a landfill now? Asked Bresler carelessly. No, I let him go, said Hill. Was that a good idea? Inquired the XO. Sorry as I was to turn a lawyer loose on society again, it was a calculated risk, replied Hill. Whatever the hell is rotten in the state of Denmark, I don't want anyone downtown in police headquarters to know we're onto it. If Van Meek disappeared, Martinez and Jarvis would know we'd rumbled them. We had Van Meek sweating like a pig, including his hands, and I made him get a good grip on an empty shotgun and a pistol. I also made him read a couple of standard NVA online propaganda pieces and slogans into a digital recorder. I told him that if he mentioned one word to anyone about our little tete-a-tete, his voice would be on every illegal NVA internet site, and the guns he'd handled would be found in close proximity to some dead bodies of Portland cops. The guy is a rodent, with a rodent's instinct for self-preservation, and he doesn't want to see those Dershowitz needles laid out for him again in a secret Homeland Security cell somewhere. He'll keep his mouth shut, I hope. So that's our 9 questionable cases. Do you see the main pattern yet, besides the fact that it all seems to be coming out of a suddenly amazingly efficient Portland Police Bureau? I'm not sure, admitted Bresler. I'm sure you've seen the media coverage, here and in other cities, when the FBI or Homeland Security or other cops arrest or kill our people, or raid our safe houses and confiscate weapons, or somehow interfere with or interdict our operations, Hill explained patiently. Every time the feds pull something like that off, they go on CNN looking like the cat that got the cream and play their "we were acting on our sources" number. Highly classified, can't comment, nudge nudge wink wink, you get the idea. They want to make us nervous and paranoid and reassure their own backers that they have this big web of informers in the NVA, which they don't, or we'd all be dead or in prison. The few people the feds have been able briefly to slip in on us have all been peripheral and were spotted and dealt with before they did too much damage. That's the one big advantage of the "you don't join the NVA joins you" rule. In order for them to get an infiltrator in deep, it would almost certainly have to be one of our own people who went bad after he got in, acting out of a personal grudge or for money. So far, that hasn't happened yet. Knock on wood. Not that you know of, Bresler reminded him dryly. True, not that we know of, admitted Hill. This kind of official deception is a standard CENTCOM-imposed psychological warfare protocol for all federal agencies and local law enforcement, a procedure that all of a sudden the Portland cops are violating all over the place. In each of these 9 episodes, they've gone out of their way to try and offer us some kind of plausible explanation as to how each one happened. Why are they doing that? Most likely to try and distract us from the fact that they now have a real informer, said Jack with a heavy sigh. And now for the kicker, said Hill. You heard about that mess we had the other night over in McMinnville? Yeah, I heard the cops had a shootout with some cholos in Redmore House and Tommy Coyle both had front row seats, said Bresler. What the hell was that all about? The media said it was just some gangbangers who'd been out cruising and doing bad acts. You're saying it wasn't a coincidence? The gangbangers were authentic, all right, Hill told him. I've looked that over 6 ways to Sunday, and the actual firefight itself seems to be just what the media says it was. A carload of low riders knocked over a liquor store. The driver was so drunk or stoned he rammed a cop car, and all hell busted loose. The cop shot 2 of the cholos, and the other 2 are in custody and getting their full legal due process, like white men never get anymore. I'm kind of inclined to put that down to one more instance of that odd divine intervention that seems to step in now and then to help us out since the white man started standing up and fighting. Fortune favors the brave and all that. That diversion may have saved us from something worse. So, what were we doing out there? The Wild West show took place right in front of a storefront in which the NVA was conducting a special command conference, said Hill. We were being briefed on a new plan Zog has come up with. They're organizing some kind of special brute squad to invade the Northwest and deal with U.S. hate-mongers, federal domestic terrorist police or something like that. Apparently, it will be kind of like the Black and Tans in Ireland a century ago. It's still in the planning stage, but Mr. Chips was bringing us the word from the Army Council to start preparing tactical and strategic plans to deal with a big increase in Fed boots on the street and a lot tougher tactics. I myself was there from 3sec acting for Colonel Redmond, and Tommy Coyle and Harry Hannon both there to brainstorm. You had both brigade commandants and an Army Council member there in the same room? Demanded Bresler. Jeez Louise, that was risky. I know, but sometimes we just have to put our heads together and work out a tough problem, and this was one of those times. The meeting never actually got started because Harry hadn't arrived yet and wasn't due for another 15 minutes when all of a sudden we hear gunfire out in the street. We scoped pretty quick that it seemed to be a Mexican beef with the cops, but we flashed spaghetti to Harry and beat feet anyway. We left volunteer Ron Kolchak behind as rear guard to cover us from the roof. You know Ron? Sure I do, said Bresler with a nod. Good man. Probably the best sniper we've got after Cat Eyes Lockhart. Okay, we all exited the building from the rear, weapons ready, didn't run into any trouble, we made it to our vehicles okay and unassed the area. Ron stayed behind for about 5 minutes covering down, then he went out himself over the roof. No problem. But when he reported back to the safe house, he had an interesting story to tell. Hill leaned forward. Kolchak was packing an M24 rifle with an infrared night scope. Between that and the streetlights he had clear vision for several blocks. Halfway down the next block, parked on the street, was an Oak Harbor Van Lines panel truck. It had been there ever since we arrived, didn't seem to be occupied, and when our scout car drove by there, they didn't see any activity. Now, you have to bear in mind that there was a gun battle going on in the street right below him, and there were sirens everywhere and more cop cars coming. In fact, I think volunteer Kolchak deserves a commendation for the grit he showed in staying as long as he did. But he sees a couple of the incoming cop cars pull up by this parked panel truck. Ron sights down on it with his scope, and he sees the back roll up and 5 or 6 people jump out onto the street and start running toward the intersection where the shooting and the yelling and the Spanish profanity was going on. Some of the guys from the truck are carrying long arms, M16s and shotguns, and they're wearing baseball caps and blue jackets that Ron says he is sure were Portland PB issue. They're led by a man and a woman in plain clothes. This group gets to the corner, followed by some regular cops who pile out of their squad cars with their weapons out. They stop. They mill around like they're confused for 20 seconds or so. And then one of the plainclothes cops, the female, waves the uniforms toward the incident with the Mexican stick-up men in the intersection, while the party from the panel truck runs back to it, gets in and rolls down the door, The two dicks get into another parked car down the street and they all drive off. All of this takes place in a period of maybe 60 seconds, while all the ruckus is going on down below in the street. "Okay," said Bresler slowly. "So there was some kind of plainclothes stakeout near the meeting site?" "Apparently. Now get this. Kolchak swears on a stack of mine comps that the two plainclothes cops he saw in the lead were Elena Martinez and Jamal Jarvis. He says Jarvis now has a shaved head, and he's wearing one of those Lion of Judah goatee beards, but it was definitely the two of them." "Ron would know them?" asked Bresler. "Affirmative," replied Hill. "He's not only seen our photos, he knows both of them from his days in the pre-1022 party when Laney and Jamal used to haul him in and beat him bloody every now and then just for shits and giggles. He said he wanted to take a shot for Auld Lang Syne real bad, but he forced himself to keep a cool head and think. He was surrounded and outnumbered. They didn't know he was there, and he wasn't sure he could beat feet. Once they spotted him, he didn't. At know whether or not our officers had gotten clear yet, and furthermore it appeared to him as if the enemy themselves were confused and caught off guard. If they didn't know what the hell was going on, Kolchak didn't feel it was his place to enlighten them." "I concur with that decision." "So do I," agreed Bresler. "Like Patton said, nobody ever won a war by dying for his country. He won it by making the other poor dumb bastard die for his country. Our guys need to live to fight another day. So what the hell were those two doing skulking in a panel truck a block and a half from where an Army Council member and two brigadiers were about to huddle?" "That's what we have to find out," said Hill. "I have to admit, Jack, that McMinnville affair is what throws me. There were only 8 or 9 very senior people in the whole Army who knew that such a meeting was going to take place at all. I had Tommy prepare a list of 5 possible venues, with me only picking McMinnville an hour before. Harry and Tommy themselves didn't know when or where until an hour or so before the meet. They were just told to stand by and be available at any moment for a priority order. Billy Jackson and Jimmy Wingo were on roving patrol outside in 2 vehicles, and each of them had one of their gun bunnies driving. They also did the preliminary security sweep of the meeting site, no bugs detected, but they didn't actually know what was going on inside the building or who would be there. I would have sworn that one was buttoned up tight. "A panel truck sounds like bugging equipment, though," said Bresler. "They might have had shotgun mics, or some of that weird microwave satellite gear." "Did you sweep everybody who came in?" "Yes, Red came down with those 2 kids from Dundee he uses a lot, Shane and Rooney, and Tommy had a couple of guys with him. I did them all myself as they came in the door, and nothing popped. I know, they can listen in on people in a basement now from satellites in space these days. They have fiber optic microbugs that are the size of a pinhead, bugs that look like cockroaches and even scuttle across the floor, you name it. The old-fashioned wire stuck on some guy's shaven belly with surgical tape is as outdated as the flintlock. Whatever it was, I can tell you that they didn't seem prepared to move on us. It looks to me like some kind of observation stakeout. But how the hell did they know where to listen in?" Hill slammed his fist into his palm in frustration. "So what do we do now?" asked Bresler. "We take every one of those incidents and we review and analyze the hell out of them," said Hill. "We make a list of names for each red flag. Who knew about those safe houses and arms dumps? Who has had any contact with any of the volunteers who went down, close enough to be able to predict their movements and finger them? Who knew what and when did they know? It. Then we take the list for each incident and look for matches. There are bound to be some. Then we take all our matches and try to fit them in with the other incidents, even if it appears there's no connection." Comrade X knew about Steve Bright, but did he or she know about the EOD machine shop? Did he or she know someone who knew about the McMinnville meeting site? Comrade Y knew Peanuts Panchko, but did he or she know about Roger West, or could they have found out? Once we've narrowed it down to a few suspects, then it gets tricky, because we will have to devise some bogus setups to entrap them, and see if we can make some Portland cops show up on cue at a certain place and time. These are the kinds of things that you will have to find out, Gary, because I can't without tipping everybody in the battalion that there's a rat around, and you know that whatever else happens, we do not want that to get about. Our morale is high, largely because so far we have been able largely to prevent infiltration of this very kind. Rampaging paranoia and mistrust can destroy the 2nd Battalion as a fighting unit just as effectively as any mass arrest. It can even seep out of the 2nd Battalion and infect other units, and we have to prevent that at all costs. This has to be handled quietly, efficiently, and above all, quickly. before anyone else dies or ends up in the Justice Center torture chambers." "Okay," said Bresler. "Any idea as to who we're looking for? I mean, what kind of person? A profile, as the cops in the old days would say? The key may lie in the fact that this seems so far to be an entirely Portland Police Bureau operation," said Hill. "If this was federal, I would say we're looking for a man, or maybe a woman, but more likely a man, with a strong military background. Most likely in intelligence, but who probably has concealed that fact from the NVA, and claims to have been just a grunt in Tikrit or something like that. He wouldn't conceal his military past completely. That would be impossible to do among men who have actually fought in the Middle East, as so many of our volunteers have, but he would be using a false name, and he would have impeccable and checkable references to back up his bogus identity. My guess is he wouldn't be burning minor arms dumps in single volunteers. He would be doing like the FBI used to do to the Cosa Nostra back in the old days when they actually fought crime, when they sent in guys like Donnie Brasco. He would be primarily an intelligence gatherer, trying to work his way up the ladder, identify as many of our people as he could, and transmit as much info as he could to his paymasters so they could hit us all at once with one big massive raid. Federal bureaucrats love big sweeps like that, so they can get their faces on TV and win that big promotion, and maybe go into politics and launch a congressional career. But the Portland Police? Hill went on, sipping his now lukewarm coffee. Local law enforcement bureaucracies are intensely conservative and change-resistant institutions. My guess is they'd stick with what they know, which is get some petty criminal on the inside by some kind of hold they had on him or her. Probably a heavy-duty prison rap they let the rat slide out from under. They tend to ignore big pictures and go for the quick fix, the quick bust to show immediate results. Quantity rather than quality. That's the way street cops get their faces on TV and get their promotions. That seems to be what is happening in this case. They're picking off random bits and pieces, an arms dump here, a volunteer or two there. Their informer is probably under intense pressure to show results, to keep handing them busts and improve the stats. Whoever it is, the mommy and the monkey are running them. So maybe we need to concentrate on snatching one or both of them and read them the gospel according to Dershowitz, suggested Bresler. A definite thought, said Hill in agreement. When we catch whoever it is, what happens then? Asked Bresler. You know what happens then, said Hill. Yes, I know, said Bresler irritably. I mean, is there some kind of set procedure for this kind of thing? A court-martial or something? I've never had to deal with it before, thank God. It varies according to circumstances, said Hill. It won't be your worry anyway. We have found that it's a good idea to keep the Army's dirty laundry as well out of sight as possible, even from the comrades. A disappearance is better for morale than an open execution. There is a special team of 3rd Section personnel who will handle it. If all goes right, one day a certain comrade will be gone, the others will be told that the person has been reassigned, and that's that. Need to know and so forth. No, said Bresler decisively. We won't do it like that. When the time comes, you call me. Wayne, I think a lot of this fine bunch of lads and lassies we have managed to assemble out of the wreckage of this continent's Caucasian population. Those 2 kids we had in here tonight are a good example. I got a good vibe off them. Northwest volunteers are the best and the bravest and the very last hope for an ancient people and civilization. And if there is anyone who has betrayed them and betrayed the sacred trust we have taken upon ourselves, then I want to look right into their eyes just before I pull the trigger, so I know damned well that they will never, ever betray their own blood again. You can tell Matt Redmond for me that 1st Portland Brigade cleans its own house. Okay, if that's the way you want it, said Hill with a nod. That's the way I want it, said Bresler. Later that night, Hill sat in his small room high above the city and looked down toward the Columbia River. The moon and the stars were out, and by their pale light he could see a fog collecting down over the water. His mind was too active for him to sleep. Here, Mousie, Mousie, he breathed to himself. He never thought of informers as rats, but as little mice, nibbling away at the sacks of grain in a barn or the loaf of bread in a pantry from behind, unseen except for the droppings they left that fouled the food and made it unfit to eat. Come on, Mousie, just stick your head out of your hole for a moment or two so I can get a glimpse of you. Then you are mine, little furry one. I know you're out there somewhere, and I will find you